G'day guys, welcome back to the True Footy YouTube channel, continuing our draft redraft series, going back through past drafts. We've done all the way from 2022 to now 2027, and today obviously we're going to go through a particularly strong draft actually. I've obviously been following the draft for 15 years. God, I'm getting old. And 2017 at the time, I remember it was there was a bit of conjecture that it wasn't a particularly strong draft, but having done several of these now, this one was probably the most difficult to try and narrow it down to 20 players, and I think the depth of talent seems to be there, even at the top end. Part of that could be the fact that obviously the further I go back into drafts, the more established those players are, because 2017, what are they now, 23, 24 years old? So that would be one argument for why this draft looks particularly strong, but I think, in general talent, this one actually did quite live up to it. Like I said, pretty hard to narrow it down to a top 20. I think after 13, you could throw a blanket over the next 12. I had to leave out a couple of players that I thought certainly was going to make the top 20 when I first started mapping it out. And it was a little bit difficult at the top end. I think there was 3 players I really considered for pick 1 and ended up going with, well, I won't spoil it. I'll tell you in about 20 seconds probably. Before we get into it, if you do me a favor and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, that would be much appreciated. Trying to get to the illustrious 24,000 subscriber mark by the draft. We're a little bit behind schedule, but I guess I only have myself to blame for that. As well, of course, I've got a playlist now on the channel with all my redrafts, so if you enjoy this one, you can go back and see other redrafts that I've done and let me know your thoughts in the comments of each one. So let's crack into 2017. This one, like I said, wasn't perceived as a particularly strong draft, or at least it was perceived as a shallow draft at the time, but we'll crack into it with the Brisbane Lions having the first pick. Feels like a long time ago that the Brisbane Lions were bad enough to have pick 1 in a draft, but they originally took Cam Rayner with this pick. I had 3 major contenders for this because it's an interesting time of their careers now where a lot of the midfielders are pretty established and you feel like the key position players are just starting to hit their prime. So it's a little bit harder to really compare some of these players. So the player that I eventually went with for pick 1 is a midfielder, and there was 2 talls that I also considered for this pick, and I'll tell you in a second. But I've gone with Andrew Brayshaw, who originally went at pick 2. I'll skip ahead a little bit and tell you that at pick 2, I had Fremantle taking Aaron Naughton when they originally took Brayshaw, who is of course unavailable now. And at pick 3, I had Carlton taking Oscar Allen from the West Coast Eagles, who originally went at pick 21 in this draft, instead of Paddy Dow, who they originally took. So separating these 3 players is hard a little bit, but I decided that Brayshaw has had the best career so far and still projects to have a very good career, and he's a known quantity to a really large extent, and obviously won the MVP award in 2022, and it just makes him the most decorated player in this draft, so I couldn't really justify not having him pick 1. The only argument against it is that sometimes, key forwards in particular will have a bit of a premium, which would be the justification for taking someone, like a Naughton or an Allen instead. Separating Naughton and Allen was really hard. I made a comment that I thought Oscar Allen had gone past Naughton in a recent video. 1 or 2 people took exception with that, so I decided to look at some stats, and statistically they're actually pretty even across the board in terms of, Naughton averages 1.6 goals a game throughout his career, and Allen, I think, 1.5. Naughton has been really consistent and known for a bit longer. Allen took a little while to come on. Naughton obviously started as a backman, if I'm not mistaken. He was certainly drafted as one. Oscar Allen, drafted as a key forward, started his career as a backman, and then played in the ruck as well. So there's all these different factors. Personally, I actually do like Oscar Allen more, but because I'm an Eagles fan, just to remove the bias, I've decided to go with pick 3, Allen behind Naughton. Let me know in the comments what neutrals think. So moving on, we've got pick 4 and the North Melbourne Football Club, who originally took Davies Uniacke. But I'm going to go with another tall here, another West Australian tall actually. They seem to dominate the top end of this draft, and go with GWS's Sam Taylor, who has emerged as one of the best key backs. Well, certainly one of the best, if not the best, young key back in the competition. He won All-Australian last year, had a very good year this year as well. Won the BNF last year for the Giants as well. So I just think he projects as a long-term, high-quality key defender, and as such, he gets a little bit of more of a premium on him as well. So we'll move on to Fremantle with pick 5, who they originally took Adam Cerra with this pick, and they'll actually go for the mature age Tim Kelly, who has had a pretty damn good career. Drafted as a mature age as a 24-year-old, he won an All-Australian jumper for Geelong in 2019. Little bit of a subject of criticism around obviously the huge trade that West Coast facilitated to get him over, but he still had a pretty damn good career, and statistically this year was his best. He obviously won the Eagles best and fairest, and averaged 31 disposals a game. So save for the fact that he's playing in an absolute dogshit team, I think Tim Kelly is still an out-and-out gun. Pick 6, we've got Collingwood taking Luke Davies-Uniacke instead of Jaden Stevenson, who they originally took at this selection. Now LDU actually had a career best year in terms of like averages of statistics, and that was kind of validated with the fact that, you know, he only played 14 games and got 13 Brownlow votes, and I think we've seen him at times explode to become a really top-line centre square player. He's an absolute bull of a midfielder, and I think on potential could go pick 1, but as these players are a little bit more mature now, I have to actually base it somewhat on, you know, what we've seen in terms of output and performance, and I think LDU has the potential to shoot up these rankings, but on exposed form so far, he goes at this pick. Then we have St Kilda, who originally took, I forget the order, it was either Caulfield or Clark first. They had 2 picks in a row. So first up, they're going to take Bailey Fritsch from the Melbourne Football Club. He went in the late 20s from memory as a mature ager out of Victoria. I think he was playing amateurs not long before he was drafted, if I'm not mistaken. But he's had a fantastic career with 211 goals from 126 games. And in 21 and 22, 2 really good years for Melbourne, of course, he kicked 55 and 59 goals. So as a medium forward who just hits the scoreboard so regularly, it's hard for medium forwards to really threaten for the Coleman, but this guy is a serious goal machine, so I'm really happy to put him here at this selection. At pick 8, St Kilda then take Adam Chera, who went at pick 5 in this year's draft, and by comparison to Andy Brayshaw, taken a little bit longer to come on, but this year we saw a career best year for him at the Blues. He had 25 disposals a game, 5 inside 50s and 4.5 clearances, and just uses the ball so well. So I'm happy with Chera here. You could argue he's probably done a little bit more than LDU, but again, I'm factoring a little bit of potential in there. I'm a big fan of LDU. So now we're at pick 9 with the Western Bulldogs. They originally took Aaron Norton here. I will say this is the start of where it got tricky. I changed this part of the order so many times, and you're comparing so many different types of players and trying to compare their output. It's hard not to just have a little bit of bias towards who you've seen more, who you enjoy watching more. So I'm going to go with Zach Bailey at this particular pick. He's just been a strong, consistent forward midfielder, high half forward for the Lions over a number of years. Consistently, particularly over the last 3 years, he'll get his 18 touches a game, his 4 inside 50s, a goal and a half a game, and he's also pretty good at showing up when the match is there to be won and put in a good, strong grand final day performance as well. So again, I'm a big fan of Zach Bailey, and I think he'll probably be the next player selected. Pick 10, Carlton. Gee, they didn't have a good draft in this year's draft. They took Dow and then Lockie O'Brien at this pick. Now I'm going to give them Gold Coast Charlie Ballard, who I think has turned into quite a good and perhaps understated key back there at the Gold Coast Suns at about 196 centimetres. He averages 8 intercepts a game this year, which puts him right up there in the rankings, and averages 6 across his career. So I think as far as key defenders go, he's quite underrated, and he would go high in a redraft. At pick 11, GWS originally took Aiden Bonner, who I think has now been delisted by North Melbourne, but they're going to take Collingwood's Brody Myercheck. Now, Myercheck, I remember him playing pretty well in the 2018 Grand Final. It wasn't until making this video that I realised that was his debut season. So he has just been a feature of that Collingwood forward line. Not only a feature of it, he has been the primary source of attack. I think it's like 4 years in a row he's won their leading goal kicker. Career best year this year with 47 from 24 games, and just a consistent avenue to goal for them. And even though he's 30 years old now, obviously this draft is predicated on drafting them at their age that they were in that time, and I think Myercheck's output makes him a strong contender to go at this pick. At pick 12, we got the Adelaide Crows, who originally took Darcy Fogarty, or Fogarty, however you like to pronounce it. I say Fogarty. I don't know if that's right. But I've got them taking the electrifying Liam Ryan with this selection. Now, Liam Ryan has faded a little bit in the last couple of years, largely due to injury. He ripped a hamstring off the bone this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if some people have forgotten how good he is. But he kicked 123 goals from 89 games, premiership player in his first season, drafted mature age, of course. In 2020, he won an All-Australian jumper for a fantastic season, and in his output, not only his output, but his attributes to play high up the ground if it's needed, and his pace and skill is an absolute feature. So I think Liam Ryan on talent goes this high again. Well, not again, actually. He went at pick 26 in the original draft, so he's moved up a little bit. At pick 13, we have the West Coast Eagles, who originally took Jared Brander. This was a good draft for the Eagles, but their first pick in Brander was not a great selection. they're going to take Noah Bolter instead of Brander this time. And Noah Bolter has quickly become a pretty damn good key defender in the league. He ranked 4th in contested marks this year, 14th in intercepts, and also gets quite a lot of meters gained for a tall defender with about 400, and that's what sets him apart from a lot of the other key backs in the league. So the Eagles get Noah Bolter at pick 13. Following that, Sydney's on the board. They had a rare blue in the first round of a draft. They normally select pretty well. Helps when you have an academy. But they took Matthew Ling originally, and now they'll go with a player called Ed Richards from the Western Bulldogs, who went a few picks later than this. He had a breakout year this year, I would argue. It's kind of hard to say breakout because I feel like he started his career super well. Then we sort of forgot about him, and then he came back hard this year, averaging about 21 disposals, ranked 8th in rebound 50s this year, and I think would be best available just about. Again, it's pretty even though. Then we've got the Brisbane Lions at pick 15. I think this was originally the Zach Bailey pick, but now they'll take kind of a similar player in Brent Daniels from GWS. Daniels has quietly become actually a pretty damn good small half forward for the GWS Giants. He kicked 26 goals from 20 games this year, 3.5 tackles a game, just gets the job done, but is super consistent and a really impactful player for the Giants. Next, we have the Western Bulldogs, who originally took Ed Richards at pick 16. Now they're going to take Darcy Fogarty. Fogarty was a little bit hard to forecast exactly what he'd be when he was drafted. There was talk of him obviously being a bit of an undersized key forward, potentially being a midfielder, but he's kind of settled as this second or third key forward for Adelaide. And his goal output is hard to argue with. 34 goals from 21 games this year, 33 from 17 last year. So not an absolute standout, but a good productive forward. At pick 17, Richmond Football Club originally took Jack Higgins with this selection, which was a pretty good selection despite the fact he doesn't play for him anymore. But I'll give them Harrison Petty this time, who is of course a premiership defender in that Melbourne backline and an absolute mainstay. We've seen him be the subject of a lot of trade discussions this year, with Adelaide desperate to get him to their club. He's also shown some forward craft as well. We obviously saw late in the year against Richmond, he kicked a bag of 6. At pick 18, we have the Brisbane Lions, who took Brandon Starcevich in this particular pick, but this time I'll give them Brian Myers. Now, he may have probably the worst first name I've ever heard, but he was the #1 goal assist player in the competition this year. He only kicked 7 goals, but he was still an unbelievable high half forward for the Cats and had a real breakout year. Like I said, he's not so much about goal output, but the way he plays in that Geelong system, generating quality inside 50s that lead to goals, make Ryan Myers a very valuable half forward. At pick 19, we have the Gold Coast Suns, who originally took Will Powell with this selection. I'm going to give them Jack Higgins, who has put together a pretty damn good career as a small forward at the top level. So, in 59 games, he's played at AFL level. He's kicked 93 goals. He also had brain surgery, didn't he, a few years ago? So the fact that he's out there playing and still playing to a high standard is incredible. 36 goals from 22 this year, 30 from 18 last year. As far as output for a small forward goes, he does the job nicely. And finally, rounding out the top 20 of this draft, the final selection, I have Richmond, who originally took Coleman Jones at this selection. Obviously, he's not there anymore. Now they're going to take Will Powell from the Gold Coast Suns, who slides just 1 pick. But Will Powell is a damn good running defender. If you've had any interest in watching Gold Coast play over the last few years, gets his 20 disposals a game, 6 rebound 50s. Again, probably a player you have to watch to really appreciate what he actually does. But I think I'd be happy with him rounding out my top 20. So those are all the selections I'll make in this particular video. Some of the names that are either notable absentees or players that I thought were definitely going to make it and didn't. Tom McCartan, the overall #1 pick in Cam Rayner, Brandon Starcevich, James Worpel, Tom De Koning, Jack Payne as well for the Brisbane Lions, which as an aside, I will say that Brisbane, despite maybe not nailing pick 1 with Cam Rayner, still did very well in this draft. I had Zach Bailey, Starcevich, Jack Payne, obviously. That's a pretty damn good haul for the Lions there. Zerk Thatcher was another one, Hunter Clark, some absentees from this top 20, but found it hard to exclude them. It took a lot of work. So as always, guys, these do generate a bit of discussion. So let me know in the comments section below what you thought of my rankings and what you have done differently. I've already started work on 2016. So as long as you guys are still interested in this series, I will keep making videos. But for now, hope you're enjoying the content. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.